Hello everybody and welcome to this video, which is kindly sponsored by Squarespace. And today, in honour of the guest in this video, we're going to be building him a website. So you can see here, first there's some categories, but I've put in modelling and remote control and modelling. That seems about right, model kits, that kind of stuff. Then I just tick a few boxes, roughly speaking, what I want this site to do. Go next, build it with AI or choose templates, either option. I'm using a template option in this particular case. So scroll through various templates they have, and they give you little previews of what the front of the website might look like. So I eventually settled on one called Gildan, that one just there. And you can play around with some basic color palettes, which you can also do once you've set up the website as well, but this obviously is just the front end change. Choose the one I like. That's a picture, so I'll probably get rid of that later. Definitely changing this picture. Put in a little bit of the about me, but obviously about the guest. That Gildan picture up top is beginning to annoy me, so I'm just going to get rid of it for now, replace it later on with something else. There's this little ticker running in the original template. I don't know if it'll be kept, but for the minute I'm going to put in the main navies that he covers. And just like that, 80% of the front page is already ready to go. So if after all these little mini tutorials I've been doing, you think you could build a website for maybe ideally naval history purposes, but you never know, you might want to do it for some other reason, then head over to squarespace.com/Drakenfell. You can get a free trial, and once you're ready, that little link will give you 10% off your first website or domain. So thanks once again to Squarespace for sponsoring the video, and on with the main show. Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking to a rather wonderful gentleman who happens to have probably forgotten more about modeling ships with extreme levels of precision and accuracy than I will ever know. So, of course, you know, if you've been to Australia, if you've been to Perth, you will hopefully have seen some of his extremely large collection in the Perth Maritime Museum, in the Shipwrecks Museum. But to learn a bit more about it, let's get him to introduce himself. So, if you'd like to let everyone know who you are.
Okay. Yeah, so my name's Gerry Westenberg. I build scale model ships from scratch. I live in Perth, Western Australia. I mainly build British and Australian ships, but I also do merchant ships. My oldest ship that I've modeled is Cheops's Royal Barge. And the most modern one I've done is, well, I've nearly finished, is the 5th HMAS Sydney. Been building since I was about 5, because I think my mother wanted to get rid of me. And I started scratch building when I was 16. I really wanted a model of HMAS Perth, and Airfix builds a model, well, has a model of HMS Ajax. So I butchered the model of Ajax, and if you kept both eyes closed, it looked pretty good. From then on, I started to modify more Airfix kits to be other ships that were similar. And then I found balsa wood, which saved my fingers because cutting plastic is deadly. And then I found my scale, which is the most ridiculous scale unless you know where it comes from. So it's the Admiralty 1 inch to every 16 feet. And 12/16s are 192, so it's 1/192nd. When I say that to people, they look at me like I'm insane, which, yeah, is pretty close, but never mind. So that's about where I am, what I do.
Fair enough. So you mentioned nowadays you work mostly in balsa wood. What exactly prompted you to shift from chopping and changing vac-formed Airfix and Revel kits over to custom building from balsa?
It's so much easier. You can, like with the 1 mil balsa wood that I use to skin my models, you can almost tie knots in it if you wet it, and it just allows far more accuracy. And as I said, it saved my fingers big time. It's just a beautiful thing to work with, and it's also very light. Very easy. So it's very forgiving. So that's why I went from the plastic kits to that sort of thing. And also you can do so much more with it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I suppose it allows for a lot more customization because you're crafting every single bit of it. I know I've got an ongoing project trying to develop something that looks vaguely like a possible refit of HMS Hood by smashing together a kit of Renown and a kit of Hood.
Yeah.
And the single biggest problem is, well, if I want to add this bit to this bit, I can trim this bit, but once I trim that bit of plastic ain't coming back. So
Yeah.
if you slightly overdo it, you're stuffed. Because yeah, I don't have the skills to start patching that kind of stuff back up again. So you mentioned you started off with a plastic model of Ajax. What was the first its first large scale 1 to 1/92 scale model you decided to do?
The first one I did was HMS Arethusa, the World War One cruiser, and that
Hmm.
was because I spent an awful lot of money and almost sold my soul to buy the Raven and Roberts British cruisers of World War Two, and they had good plans of Arethusa, so it was like, oh well, I'll try my skills on that. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, when I've had my exhibitions, kids always say, "What was the first ship you ever built?" And I show them that. And when I look at it, it's like, my God, yeah, I can tell that's my first ship. So, but I mean, being my first ship, I've been learning ever since then. So that was that one. And then from there, I started doing HMAS Perth, the cruiser, and HMAS Perth, the destroyer. And that's when I realized that plans are not all that they are made out to be. A certain person who will not be named now, I had all sorts of visions of stringing him up by his thumbnails because he butchered the two plans, and that made life absolutely miserable for me. And ever since then, the plans are the thing that I come to grief on.
Yeah. And then, of course, you've got the problem of this is what the plan says, but is it the final plan? Or is this the plan that they had going into the build, and the plan that as built
Yeah.
is different? And then once it's gone into service, it's like, well, yes, we built it this way, but 6 months later we hauled it into dry dock and we did all these other interesting things to it.
Yeah, exactly. I've just finished Ark Royal, and the four 8-barrel pom poms that are fore and aft of the bridge. Um, three of them have these platforms to load the ammunition, but there's only one that needs it, because if you go up forward, you've got the one closest to the bridge is on a sponson,
Mhm.
so it's raised, whereas the other two are at deck level, and there is no sort of large ammunition platform for any other ship that's got these pom poms. And so, but on the drawings, it's got these platforms for all three. It's like, I know that doesn't work, so mine only has it on the
Mm.
first one forward. So yeah, even and that was an Admiralty plan. So even those, as you said, was it like this when it sank, or because that's the other thing which I haven't mentioned is, if a class of ships has served during any war and one of those ships sank, then I'll build the one that sank. And that's my way of saying thank you for your sacrifice. And it makes it more difficult because, of course, it's sunk and there's no photographs. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Although sometimes the ones that sink earlier on in the war tend to be somewhat closer to the original plans than
yeah,
whatever Frankenstein comes out at the end.
true.
Yeah. I just remember when I was, because I've just come back from Scandinavia, and there was a very nice chap in the Helsinki, uh, in Helsinki at the I think it's Suomenlinna fortress, but they've got a military museum layout there, and he's also into building model ships. And a lot of the displays they've got there are stuff that he built 20, 30 years ago. And he
Mm.
was looking at it and going, I could do a lot better now by adapting models that people have made subsequently. But when I made this, there were no models for
Yeah,
this.
exactly. Yeah.
So he's had to scratch build them, and I suspect similar for yourself.
Mm.
Uh, apart from the joy of working in 1 to 192nd, even these days, there's a surprising number of relatively famous ships that do not have any model kits that anyone could get, even if they wanted them.
Yeah.
So you mentioned obviously you've done mostly Royal Australian and Royal Navy ships. Was there any particular reason for choosing those? I mean, obviously the Australian connection is obvious, but
My mother is British, well, was British, and I sort of was brought up on Sink the Bismarck movies and not Gerry Rafferty, the Australian actor. I can't remember his first name. So Chips Rafferty, that's him. And every Anzac Day, which is very special to Australians, I'd sort of watch the war movies and play with my ships and all that, and it was always British, and or Australian. And I just like the looks of their ships. I'm somewhat biased, so that's why I've chosen those. I have done some Dutch ones because of my heritage. My dad was Dutch, and also I suppose partly because Perth was involved in the Battle of the Java Sea, and the Dutch did out at Tromp, and the destroyers were there. So that was also part of why I built those. And the ages, like I've got HMS Victoria, and I've got HMS Dreadnought, and so on. So I just choose ships that interest me from an historical point of view, or the story about it, or it just looks really cool. So that's why I've chosen them.
fair enough. So I suppose that this is a question. Hopefully, will people be seeing some of the photos from the display in the museum, and you've got a few books as well. How on earth do you go about getting all the details so spot on? Because when I was looking back over some of the photos from the museum trip I did last year, I actually went and got some of my reference photos that I use for making videos, some of the close-up ones, and then I was going, you know what, I can match this to I can match what's on the model to this photo. How on earth do you do that, considering that you know, in theory, the big companies, various modeling companies that are presumably spending an awful lot of money in their research, quite often end up making kits with rather major things missing. Like as Ryan Szymanski from USS New Jersey mentions, there's an entire stem of the aft part of the keels that sticks out over the Iowa class battleships, but there is no Iowa class battleship model on this planet that actually has it. And you'd think the keel is a somewhat important feature of the ship.
Yeah, maybe. It takes a hell of a lot of photographs, and just wandering around the internet trying to find stuff. So, for example, HMS Repulse. If you look forward at the hangar, the two hangars, in between the two hangars, there's it's a vent, I think, and it's got an anchor sitting on it. And I was almost finished Repulse, and I had to stop because I could not work out what that was. And you can sort of see it from some views, but it just wasn't there. So she went in the cupboard, and I think it took about 4 or 5 years before I happened to pounce on this photograph, and it's like, that's what it is. So it's mainly, I mean, as we've discussed, the plans are interesting, but I just look for photographs, and also my knowledge. I'm sounding snotty, but my knowledge of what the British ships had. So, for example, I've only built a few US ships, and one of them was USS Houston. And whereas with any British ship, I can just sort of look at and go, oh yeah, that's a wash deck locker, or whatever. Looking at a US ship, it's like, I've got no idea what that is. Okay, so now I've got to go and find out what that is. Whereas with a British or Australian ship, I can look at a very out of focus photograph and go, I know what that is because, I know what it looks like and where it is, and therefore it's one of these things. So that helps. And I suppose because I built so many ships, then I've got muscle memory that, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. And also sort of transferring from, like HMAS Perth, which is ex-Amphion, and I'm building a Leander class or whatever. So I've got an idea of, yeah, that sort of looks like that. So, that's what I'll put in. So that's, I suppose, how I try and get the detail as good as I can. And that's HMAS Perth the Cruiser was the first time that I realized that I had to use photographs, because the plans that I purchased and paid good money for, Perth's, so sorry, I'll bore you, but so obviously Admiralty plans are built, drawn in color. And if you have something major done to them, then that's done in another color and they hatch out, the wrong or the old lines and so on. And what this person did was he got a set of plans for Perth and he got a photocopy, which is black, so no colors. And instead of doing what I paid him good money for, and sort of magnifying glass, looking and looking at photographs and going, oh, it's that line, he just made it up. And so I got some really good photographs of my very first model of Perth. And I looked at the photographs and I looked at my model, and one of us was wrong. And I had a suspicion it was my model. So eventually I found the plans that he had used, and it took me 2 weeks with the magnifying glass and the plans and the photographs to work out what it was. So that's the sort of thing that I have to do, because I'm very fussy, and if I look at it and think that's not right, I can't do anything about it. I've got to either put it away or until I find the information.
Well, and that's to the benefit of everyone who gets to enjoy the models. Because I say it's almost uncanny sometimes. Look at I've been comparing photos of the models and photos of the actual ships and going, to the point that sometimes when you're trying to, I must admit, I bet, because as you probably saw when I was in Perth, I was taking a lot of photos of those models. I bet for some ships that don't have as many photos as you'd like, I've actually ended up using the models to go, look, okay, well, this photo shows me this, but that this bit of the deck house or this turret is obscuring this other thing, and then I just look at the model, the photo of the model, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's what's around there.
Oh, cool.
The thing, especially for some of the earlier stuff. I mean, World War II stuff, there's quite a lot of overhead shots from aircraft and everything.
Yeah.
But some of the early interwar, and then, as you mentioned, you've done like HMS Victoria and Dreadnought, there's not a huge amount, if any, overheads because aircraft didn't exist, and they didn't go under bridges that often. And so sometimes trying to work out, what actually would be the arc of fire on this ship, because it looks like the turret can turn X amount, but what would be in the way that you do not want to blow up?
Yeah.
And those kind of things are quite helpful. So, of course, you've mentioned having to shelve things occasionally until you find more references, but roughly speaking, how long and involved is the process of going, I want to build this ship, to I have this ship?
Okay. Obviously, it depends on size, right? But if you look at, for example, the Queen Mary that I've got, now her plans were perfect, so she only took about 6 months to build, whereas the longest build ever was my model of the DDG HMAS Perth, and that was 19 years. And the reason for that was the plans I bought from the same person that I bought the other ones from were trash, and she was still in commission in the Australian Navy. And then, without my permission, mind you, the Navy kept changing her. I mean, how rude. So she'd come into Fremantle, and I'd rush down and take photographs of her, and then I'd go back home and I'd take her out of the cupboard and start building stuff. And then it's like, oh, hang on, oh, I need the photo of that. Oh, she's left. Damn. So she'd go back in the cupboard, and then Perth would turn up at Fremantle 6 months, a year later or whatever. And I'd rush down, take photographs, come home. It's like, you've changed. Oh, what? So now what am I going to do? So, I'd sort of try and dodgy that up. But most of the time she'd go back in the cupboard. And eventually I started drawing my own bits from photographs that I'd taken of her. And eventually I got a date and time. Oh, because the other thing was she'd come in sort of portside one time and then starboard another time. And I'm thinking I've got all the information, but that's when you changed. Damn it. So, eventually I sort of picked a time where I had sort of got both sides, and I finished her off. But so that's that one. Some of the ones that were pretty easy, I suppose, was HMAS Waterhen, the World War II destroyer. HMS Gloucester, the cruiser, was pretty good, except the bridge area was really difficult to pick up, especially when like one of the decks is actually half blocked by the hangar. And so, looking at it, was like, that doesn't make sense. That's not a proper deck. And then it's like, oh, hang on. Yeah, it's because that deck is actually, the hangar comes up to it, so that sort of thing. I'm rambling and I haven't actually answered the question. So, for example, my Ark Royal has taken me about 12 years to build because I was under a lot of stress at this point in time when I was building it. And the boat deck that she has on both sides, you've got the boat deck, and then you've got supports, and directly under the supports, you've got the portholes. And when I was putting the supports in, the deck was there, and the portholes were there, and the supports went below the deck, the portholes. And it's like, you've got to be kidding me. So I cut Ark Royal lengthways in half, which was insane. Turns out that when I was, because as I said, I've finally finished her, but part of finishing her was I had to, put these supports in, and it's like, they're too big. And what I had done was I had measured the supports too big, and if I had measured them correctly, they would have actually fitted. So I cut that thing in half for no reason. That was so much fun. So she's taken about 12 years to build. So yeah, it depends on the size. So HMS Rodney took an awful lot of time because her hull, the plans that I had didn't really have sections. There was only like 3 or 4. So I had to extrapolate what her hull looked like. And, eventually I got her going. And, things like Carly rafts, they used to take me about an hour to build each one. And, some ships have like 30 of them. That's 30 hours of doing really nothing. Whereas now with 3D printing that I get done, that's so much time because I've got to break it off the sprue, paint it, and then put it on. It takes all of 5 minutes, Wow. So in that respect, I've shortened the time frame for building stuff. So does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it's a great insight into how long it takes and the kind of little details that you have to go into, because I think this is one of the things that people sometimes don't appreciate, is that because you can go down to your local hobby shop, such as there are left anymore, and pick up a trumpeter, like 2-3 foot model, and it looks really complicated, and to be honest, often is hideously complicated. I'm just looking over there at the I've got an Essex class carrier I built years and years and years ago. Gave me living nightmares because it's only about this long, and every single 20mm Orlecan is so tiny you can crush it with tweezers. And having to paint each one and individually place each one. And that's when the stuff is just clip it off, paint it, stick it on, let alone craft the thing in the first place. So when people see these large scale models, they've got to appreciate, this is not something that someone sat down and said, what I'm going to do this weekend.
Well, like with Ark Royal that I finished, she's got 3 windbreaks, one straight across the deck, and then 2 that they fold in or out. And I was just the windbreaks that other ship kits have got are wrong. And I've got a few photographs of these windbreaks, and they've got these drilled holes in them. And so I was punching them out with because I have lots of medical and dental things which help me. And at the end, it's like, how many did I do? So in the 2 side windbreaks, there are 691 holes that I have punched through. And it's like, oh, okay, that was fun. So, 2 of those, and then the big one's got more than those. So even on those 3 things, just punching the holes, yeah, it can be lots of fun.
So I guess, given how long it takes to build these things, how many ships have you actually built at this point? And do you have any favorites for whatever reason?
Okay, so I've built about 140, and that includes an Iroquois helicopter, which was about 3 foot long, a P3 Orion, which was about 4 foot long. So that's over and above. But I've done about 140 ships in my time, including the Royal Yacht Britannia, which I built twice, once for the then governor of WA, Sir Richard Trowbridge, which was actually broken by His Royal Highness. And he did apologise. The story is that I sort of found out about the fact that Sir Richard Trowbridge was the new governor and he'd been captain of the Britannia. So I sent a request in saying, would you like a model built? And he came back and said, is it free, sort of thing? I went, yeah. So I started building it, and I'd nearly finished it. And the Queen and the Duke came out because it was around the time of Charles and Di's wedding. And they stayed at Government House. And just before they turned up, his PA contacted me and said, look, can you just bring it in? So I did. And a couple of days later, he contacts me and said, I can come pick it up. So I go to pick it up, and he said, His Royal Highness apologises. He'd broken it. And for many years, I thought, shall I send a bill to Her Majesty? I thought, maybe not. I've been in the Tower of London. So, but that's 2 I built. Obviously, HMAS Perth, I built her twice. One of those models is in the museum, and the other one I have. Queen Mary is the biggest and most impressive one that I've built. I've built, as I said, the Cheops's Royal Bard, which is about inches long. That was the first IKEA flat pack, I think, which when they found it, they were excavating. I've built most at the moment. I've got all bar 3 of the fighting ships of the Royal Australian Navy. I'm currently building another, so that's about 43. I'm currently building another 40 odd, which are the support ships. So things like HMAS Tobruk, Supply, Success. So hopefully by about the end of next year, I'll have the whole of the Royal Australian Navy from its commencement in 1911 up until now. And I'd really, I don't know if you can put this on, but I'd really love someone to buy it and put it in a museum, because the story of the Australian Navy is unique. It is, such a compact Navy that has, fought throughout the last century. The Australian Navy is always, I know I'm being very proud, but, they've always punched above their weight. And it is such a unique collection that I'm building up that I think it would be brilliant to, have as a memorial, I suppose, to what they've done. And when I've done the exhibitions, so many people have come up and said, oh, have you got HMAS so-and-so? My dad surfed on that, or my, brother or sister or whatever is on it. And, quite often it's like, no, I don't, but I've got her sister, and there it is there. And I don't know if I've told you, I volunteer at the museum on a Thursday, and I always have a ship next to me. And people come up and go, oh, wow. But this one time I had HMAS Waterhen, the destroyer, and this guy walks past, does a double take and comes back and goes, that ship saved my dad. It's like, please explain. And it turns out that his dad was fighting in Tobruk and had been wounded. And so he was evacuated on HMAS Waterhen. And it's like, oh, that's pretty cool. So, that sort of thing happens. And so it tells the story of the Australian Navy. And that's, as I said, I've got about 43 of those. So that's a third of the collection that I have that are Australian. And then I've got, starts with HMS Dreadnought. I've got Dreadnought, and then I've got Invincible, Indefatigable, HMS Australia, which is the Indefatigable class, Renown, Repulse, Queen Mary, Hood. So that's the battle cruisers covered. And then I've got Barham, as she was when she was sunk, and Vanguard, and HMS Victoria. So I've got quite a few battleships. And then in the cruisers, I've got quite a lot. So I've got Gloucester, Neptune, Hermione, Charybdis, Spartan, Effingham, and so it goes on. Destroyers, I've got quite a few. And I've also got like Fife, and Antelope from the Falklands. So that's all of that. Merchant ships, I've got Great Eastern, which is an amazing ship.
Yeah, one of my favorite.
Oh, like just insane the way it looks. So I've got that, and I've got a little coastal ship, Kinabalu, which was a set of plans on some model boat book, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I built her. So that's the sorts of things that I've got.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm sorry. Favorite has to be HMAS Perth, but then I've got about another 119, which are my favorites, sadly.
Yeah. There's well, I was just going to say on the subject of Australian ships, it's actually quite interesting because in the Mediterranean campaign, when Admiral Cunningham was asking for extra reinforcements, one of the things he notes in his communications, he's like, well, I do need any ship you can possibly spare, but especially if you can spare some Australian ships, that would be great.
Oh,
Because the scrap iron flotilla, obviously, and HMAS Sydney, which was just kind of, we let the gates open, and she just goes out and murders everything on the high seas.
Yeah.
Occasionally attempts to blow up planets, and then comes back again with no ammunition.
Yeah. Well, actually, I've got one of the things I built is the wreck of HMAS Sydney. And sorry, I'm sorry to do this to you, but anyway. So I put my model of HMAS Sydney wreck in an exhibition as sort of a competition, and nobody was interested in it, and I couldn't understand why. And then it dawned on me that the model actually looks like rubbish, because she's so badly damaged that nobody can look at it and go, wow, that's a really great looking ship. And it's like, oh, okay, that started me thinking. So the museum purchased my model of the wreck, but I said, look, I'm going to give you a model of Sydney the day before she sank. And so now people who don't know anything about ships can look at the model of Sydney before she sank and the model of her on the ocean floor and go, oh, wow, that is amazing. So that model is, in the museum. And given what's happened to like the Titanic and so on, in another 100 years, they'll be able to look at the model and go, that's what she looks like. Oh, wow, what's she look like now? She's disintegrated and so on. So yeah, talking about Sydney, that was one of my most favorite models. And my very good friend, Mike McCarthy, who used to be one of the curators at the WA Maritime Museum, he held a forum in 1991, I think it was. And it was amazing. There was Barbara Winter and Montgomery and all sorts of people. And after it, I said, oh, if we ever find Sydney one day, I'll build a model of it. Ha, 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 ha. And they found it. So I did. But yes, I love Sydney. She's brilliant.
Yeah. So speaking of, because you said you have a ship with you when you're at the WA Museum, and you had an exhibit well, you had a fair number of your ships there. So how and where can people go and see your work, and how can they support your work as well?
Okay, at the moment, I take great umbrage at how easy you make Squarespace look, because I've been trying to do a web page for months and months, and I'm thinking I must be losing my marbles, because this everyone says it's easy, and it's like, oh, no, I don't. So at the moment, the only way they can support me is to go to the museum on a Thursday.
Hmm.
But I would love to have a website to show my ships and that. So at the moment, they should contact me by email.
Hmm.
And they can come and see my next exhibition, which is in February of 2026. And that'll
Hmm.
be at the same place where you were at the Shipwrecks
Yes.
Gallery. But yeah, at the moment, I've got sort of no place that people can go to and go, oh, wow, that's it. So
There are
I
some
might.
books of your work, though, aren't there?
Oh, yeah, yeah. They are. Um, if someone wants them,
Hmm.
I can, get them printed and send them to them. So
Hmm.
there's the first one, which my very good friend David Nicholson, he's the one that encouraged me to do this,
Hmm.
because he also walked past me on a Thursday one time and stopped and came back and said, "Oh, can I take a photograph of the ship?" It's like, because he's a very good photographer. And I said, "Yeah, fill your boots." So he did, and then he walked off. That was fine. And this is where he's regretted it ever since. He came
Hmm.
back and said, "Have you got other ships?" It's like, "Yes." "Can I take photographs of those?" "Yes." And since then, he's the one that said, "Look, you really should exhibit these." And it's like, why? No one would be interested. Um, and from then, he's the one that sort of said, "Oh, you should have a book." So I've got the three books. The the first one was sort of the ones that I had built at that time. And then the second one focuses on the Australian Navy. And then the third one was basically a catch up of ships that weren't in the first book that I've built since then. So yeah, if people want books, they can send me an email, and I can sort it out and send it to them.
Cool. Awesome.
And one day
So,
maybe I'll have a Squarespace.
well, I can help you with that. We'll talk about that once
Uh,
the interview is finished. Because
when
yeah,
you
it
say
turns,
that,
yes. Well, it turns out I'm actually quite good at building those things for some bizarre reason,
I've
having never done
noticed.
web development before. Um,
Yeah, I've noticed, and that's where I every so often I swear at you, like, you'll have the ad saying, "Oh, I do Squarespace." It's like, no, you don't, you swine. Like,
so, what would you say has been the hardest skill to learn when it comes to building these ships, or perhaps alternately, which has been the hardest ship to build from a mechanical standpoint, as opposed to
uh,
someone keeps changing the blasted thing?
yeah, the hardest skill is patience. My wife every so often just asks the lovely question, like, "This is your hobby, isn't it, dear?" "Yes." "And you're still enjoying it?" "Yes." "Go away." Okay. Um, so apart from that skill, I suppose the hull has been the hardest thing. Like, all the other stuff is just detail, but actually shaping the hull, and getting the balsa wood to go where it's supposed to, that's been the hardest. So my first ship that I really did, just sections and then skinning it, was HMAS Queenborough, the ex-destroyer that was turned into a frigate. And I thought I was really being clever, because I had the deck, and then I glued the sections onto it, and then I put the ribs in, so everything's looking fine, and then I skinned it. But the there was no sort of rigid structure, and so when I skinned it, the ship was actually twisting, and I didn't know until I'd finished. And then I'm looking at it and going, "Oh my God." So then I'm trying to untwist it, and I'm sort of untwisting, and then it's crack, crack, crack. Oh God, hang on, now what am I going to do? So I then worked on, well, what can I do for that? So then I got the idea of having the deck, and then the profile, and that makes a T, which is
Hmm.
reasonably strong. And then when you put the sections in, the ability to twist is almost zero. and then when you put the ribs in, it can't really move at all. So when I skin it, that's fine. But the other thing, because I'm a slow learner, I really am. So what I was doing was I was skinning every bit between the sections. And so that meant that I had, sort of holes, I suppose, or, indentations between the two pieces on all the way along. And then one day I had this epiphany, like, why don't I do longer bits? Oh, that might be an idea. So, brilliant. So now what I do is I'll try and do as much as I can in one piece until it buckles. And where it buckles, then I'll cut it. So it means far less, sanding and filling and sanding and filling. And so that's a major problem. And then how the propeller shafts fit into the hull. I was trying all sorts of fun and games with that. And eventually the simplest method works. And that's just to sort of put it close to it, cut it where it looks like it's okay, and then sort of sand it a little bit and then glue it on and fill it. And that works the best. So that's, I suppose, the hull is the nastiest thing to construct, especially the bow where it comes in so fine, and I'm skinning it, and it's got to come to a point. So yeah. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's I mean, the funny thing is, some of the issues you're describing are actually also issues that people had building the actual ships. So
Yeah.
when your model building is so accurate, you start to run into actual shipwrights problems.
Yeah, well, I suppose one of the things which has always annoyed me is these people that designed and built these ships had no sort of care or concern about poor schmucks that are going to model them in the future. Like, that was just irresponsible. They should have looked at it and gone, some modeler one day is going to have problems with this. Okay, we're not going to have that bit. We'll do something else. But they never did.
Yeah, it's I must admit, actually, even looking at some of the builders models that they have in museums, like in the National Maritime Museum in the UK, there's this sort of 14, 15-foot long King George V, which is the original builder's model. And it looks fantastic because it's all painted up in this slightly weird purplish grey, which I think actually works really well. And a lot of the gun barrels and stuff are all left in nicely polished brass. So it looks fantastic until you get right up close and you can see very, very close when you're looking at the level of individual portholes and stuff. You can see all these little corrections where somebody's clearly got 90% of the way through and gone, no, that's not right, and had to retouch everything. And considering that thing is like about half a ton to a ton's worth of brass work, I can't imagine, if someone's built the superstructure. And again, if you go to the National Maritime Museum, viewers, have a careful look, and you'll notice on one of the superstructure levels, what's clearly happened is somebody's punched out all the portholes nice and neatly, then gone back either to the plans or, to be honest, considering it was Bill's model, possibly just looked out the window at the ship and gone, that's one too many portholes, and then had to go back in, fill in every single porthole, and punch out new ones at a slightly different interval spacing. And if you look very carefully, you can just about see these little half crescents of the first attempt in the brass.
Yes, Smithers, come here. Have you noticed there's one more than on the ship? Oh dear, yes. Yes, can you go and fix that, Smithers? Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, that would really upset your day.
Yeah, yeah. So I think we've run out of questions, unless there's anything else you wanted to mention about your work.
No, I must tell you, I'm currently working on another 60.
Mm-hmm.
So just because I'm bored and having nothing better to do. So I'm building the Empress of Britain, couple of, well, as I said, the 40 odd RAN support ships. What other ones am I building? Oh, I'm doing Warspite in World War II, Tiger, Courageous as a battle cruiser, Tiger, the battle cruiser, and VG, and Dunedin. Yeah.
Hmm.
So Fiji, I've got HMS Gloucester, and of course Gloucester and Fiji went down.
Yeah.
I was tossing up between Trinidad and Fiji, but it makes the the pair. So
Mm.
I'll be doing Fiji. And Dunedin, as I said, I'll build one that sank, and Dunedin's the only one that sank. Um, so yeah, I'm building those. I've also got things like a lighthouse ship and a kill class anti-submarine frigate or corvette or whatever it
Hmm.
was. So yeah, that's things I'm building. But yeah, there's about 60.
So next time there's a museum in a couple, year and a half's time, there'll be even more things for everyone to look at.
Yes, which is it's sort of going to be a bone of contention because I don't think they'll fit.
Have to have
They're
some
going to overflow.
multi-tier displays or something.
Yeah. So
So, thank you very much for sharing your expertise and knowledge, and hopefully everyone's been enjoying that and the various photos of all the different models that have come up. So, if you want to learn more, hopefully by the time this video is up, there will be some form of additional website that you can go on and email or contact, but we shall see. Um, yeah, hope you enjoyed it. If you happen to be in Perth, obviously Thursdays at the museum, if you want to go and chat to the man himself. And otherwise, I suppose we'll just have to wait until all the models come out again in a year February.
yeah.
So, thank you very much, and I'll see you again, everyone, in another video.